Like you just believe this because there's no other way to believe. There's no other way of thinking. And if you did think elsewhere or elsewise, you would be ridiculed, chastised, murdered, disenfranchised, all that stuff.
Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, everybody. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Today's episode, Benji and I talk about the messy middle, which could be a nickname for my haircut today. Look at this. Look at this. But in fact is much deeper than that. It is about how if you actually want to make progress with your sexual integrity or with any deep aspect of your life, you need to go for some time into a space where kind of nothing makes sense. We call it the messy middle, but it's a place where you're kind of letting go of your old self and you're updating your hard drive to become your new self. And in so doing, it can be messy and it can definitely feel deeply uncomfortable because you start to ask questions like, who am I? What do I believe? Right? But when you have an addiction, I think most people don't understand how deeply that addiction is sutured onto your identity, your sense of self. And a lot of people pretend like they want to get rid of things like pornography, but in fact, they're afraid of what their life might look like if they didn't have it in their life, because that's what they've known. That's been their source of comfort for years and years and years, if not decades, right? So we talk about this messy middle and we unpack it so that you can feel invited to go there, not dwell there, not live there, but to pass through there so that you can really come out on the other side as an intentional person who has fought for their beliefs and knows who they are and is willing to become a Chanulguk person or a high noon person. So let's get into it. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You are in for a treat today. You know why? Because you're alive. That's why. That's why.
Oh,
that's the only reason why. And also because it's going to be an amazing episode.
And an amazing episode. Let's do it.
Benji and I, before this podcast, were just talking a little bit about all the stuff we can't say on the podcast. There's a lot of stuff.
Like?
That's just not appropriate. So I really wanted to bring up this topic. It's big on my mind because it's my life. I started like a side podcast years ago, which was just me sitting in my garden, ranting about stuff. And I feel like I should continue it, but it was called The Middleman. And it's because my whole life, I've always felt like the Gonzo effect, which is, I think I mentioned on the podcast once, this idea that Gonzo was from a universe, like from the Muppets, for anybody who doesn't know Gonzo. Come on, catch up.
Sorry, it's not but I got you now. Yeah.
But Gonzo, he's the one with the weird nose, and he's always like, on my planet, we do this. And everybody's like, what? Because it's all so weird. It's like, on my planet, we put potatoes in our pie or whatever. He'll just say really weird stuff. And everybody's like, what a weirdo, what a weird planet. But nobody's ever met anybody from his planet. So he's completely unrelatable. He's one of those guys. And I feel like that too. But I also realized that in this era, people who want to have sexual integrity are increasingly becoming weirdos, right? For wanting something so basic as like, a healthy marriage and kids.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like an act of war for some people. Like, how dare you? It's the patriarch to want love. There are people out there that say that love don't exist and they're attacking the idea of love because they're in such pain, right? And so this is not to get political. Not to get anything. That's not our lane. Our lane is sexuality. But in this episode, I wanted to unpack how we're in an era when you cannot just gravitate to what was. You can't gravitate towards too extreme one side or the other, because then you'll turn into a psychopath, which is happening left and right. I know, we both know plenty of people who were like stable, normal people not so long ago, and now they're just straight psychos, like online, just on rampages, screaming at people for no reason, just trolling out of control. So you cannot join sides. It's like all the real activities in the middle, right? And that's also true of your journey of sexual integrity, so I just wanted to unpack it all. This is context, everybody. It's really important that if you're gravitating towards easy conclusions, then you're probably just retreating back to one side or another. But all of the work that all the gains that you'll ever get in your life are from going into uncharted territory with the right motivation, with help from people, but it's messy and there's no clear answers. Those answers only come to light after some effort, right? So do you know what I'm saying? Does any of this make sense?
Like a little bit of it.
Okay.
I mean, I think something you're touching on is that you feel like you don't belong on this planet sometimes when you
Whoa. This is
around
not a
people.
cry for help.
And
Let me just get that.
yes, sure. And you definitely are a little strange, but I feel you. I feel you. I'm the same. I mean, like I was just talking with someone about, getting blessed at 18, and they were like, how, like, is that even possible? Right.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Sure.
and it sounds wild, sure, for like normal, but I didn't think it was weird at all. I mean, that's the truth of it. So that's just one example of many reasons why being different is, I don't know. I don't know if being different or it's just like a perception thing. I remember giving a sermon on top of a mountain when I was like doing youth pastoring, and there's a bunch of youth on the top of this mountain, and the sermon title was How to Be Weird. And it was just statistics. I just laid out a bunch of stats on why being normal is actually a terrible idea, because
Sure.
normal is obese, normal is addicted to something, normal is poor, normal is broke, right? And then I was like, hey, if you guys are weird, another word for being weird would be abnormal or otherworldly, if you actually look at it in the dictionary. And I'd very much rather be otherworldly instead of just being the average normal person. So yeah.
Absolutely. That's one direction we should go, is really fighting against being normal. Some stuff, it's fine to be normal. Like having a car, your car is white. My car is white, right? We didn't go the extra mile to get some decal on our car with like True Parent's face or something, right?
Yeah, I got you. My
You know what
car's
I mean?
red, just
You got to
for the record.
pick your weird. You got to pick your weird, because if everything's weird all the time, then it's just exhausting. Like, oh, these socks don't have enough flair. I got to get some socks with some more colors and shapes.
I feel
right?
like that's exactly how you think.
I just feel some stuff is not me enough. And
Sure.
I like things that are thoughtful. Like, this is the thing, is if you're going to have a life of real, like, genuine, fits you like a glove, a life that actually fits you, then that's going to take a certain level of intentionality of you figuring out who you actually are and what you actually want and what you actually need. And a lot of people don't do that. They just make a lot of assumptions and they approximate. Like, they'll say, well, these kind of clothes look good on other people, so then I'll just adopt that fashion. Or
Right.
these thoughts fit this group of people, so I'll just become like them, rather than, and that's why, okay, one thing that I can reveal, everybody, about prior to us speaking was pressing record, is there was a group of people that I was just exposed to that really don't like religion. And they even created nonprofits about recovering from religion and all this. And it's coming from I think, a sincere place. A lot of people get so hurt by religion. Our faith is definitely not an exception to that. But there's a way of understanding context, and then there's painting things with very broad strokes. Okay, I had a bad experience in my religious upbringing, therefore religion is bad, let's kill it, right?
Yep.
That's called not thinking so much. And these approximations, making a group of people good or a group of people bad without thinking, is very dangerous. And as you're going on, again, this is not a diatribe for how to live a life. We're not life coaches here. But in terms of sexual integrity, one massive step is what, Benji? What's like the first thing we ask people when they say, hey, I'm struggling with porn, how can you help me? What do we ask them? What's the question?
Why do you want to quit? Is that it?
No, Benji, what are you, fired?
Courage. What am I, 5 years
you've
old?
You've ranted about this on this podcast numerous times.
Why do you want to quit? No, what is it?
What do you want?
What do you want? All right.
Come on now.
Same thing.
You awake? No, it's not. It's very clear. What do you want? So if not this, then what? And so that is extremely hard for people to answer, because they haven't thought about who they are and what they actually want out of life. And so they just live a life that never quite feels right. It's kind of like, and I grew up with a lot of weird sizes. I'm a very small person, and I always had shoes that didn't quite fit right. Sucks. I always had pants that weren't quite. I got in trouble at a job once because the owner of the restaurant I was working at, was like my first job. He's like, pull up your pants. And I was like, okay. So I pulled up my pants. And then he physically pulled up my pants. This is back in the day when apparently you could do this. And he's like, this high. And then I quit. It was like I'd worked there for a couple hours. It was mutual. The idea is that my pants I never, up until I was in my late 20s, could find belts that worked and pants that fit. So it always felt a little bit off. Think about that. This is a stupid example, but that's people's life. Do you wonder why you like want to run away from yourself? It's because your thoughts don't quite feel like they fit. Your emotions don't quite feel like, I don't like the way that I feel. I don't like the way that I am. I don't like the way that I look. And so you're living this life where everything's kind of jilted and ill-fitted. And that's an awful feeling. Have you ever had socks that are a little too big and the heel of the sock you can see above the shoe? Have you ever had that? I had that like for, decades because I'm so small. It's a weird feeling, but it's all the more weird when you haven't actually figured out who you are in terms of your faith, right? So to paint a religion as being bad, that's crazy because are you saying it's bad for everybody? That's very convenient. Or is it just bad for you? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And so when we're building our ideal self, we really have to spend some time in purposeful discomfort, this middle ground where nothing quite makes sense. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's intentional discomfort to get somewhere more clear. Whereas if you don't do that work, you'll always feel uncomfortable, but in a comfort that you're used to. So it's like, right? It's like, why do people stay in abusive relationships? Because they're used to it, right? That's what they think they
it's
deserve.
uncomfortable to go into different territory in the relationship.
Absolutely. It's like, it's a discomfort, but it's a discomfort that they know. And they don't want to go through the discomfort of calling that person out and separating from that person. But it's the same with porn. I asked somebody last night, why is it that you still let porn into your life? They're like, oh, I slipped at night. It's like, okay, but how's that possible? If it was really an issue, then your phone wouldn't be anywhere near your room at night.
Yeah.
Why do you still allow it back? It's because you're still in an abusive relationship, right?
Similarly, a question that I will often ask, people will come on a call, right, and say, well, I've tried everything. And that's usually when people get the most frustrated and that's the last straw. It's like, I've tried everything. Yeah. And then I always ask, okay, what have you tried? Sincerely. And it's not much. And they kind of like very sheepishly were like, well, I've tried to, do conditions and I've tried to tell my parents once. And I was like, you haven't tried. That's like, you haven't tried. That's like saying I've tried to lose weight and all I've done was, stopped eating McDonald's. And it's like, well, that's nothing. That's just one piece of it, of 1,000 steps.
Yeah.
And so I just think it completely reframes things when we realize like we haven't tried everything. We haven't tried our best. And that's a really sobering thing for people to realize, but it's actually very humbling. And I think it's the first gateway people have to actually getting serious. I had this big moment for me when I was, when my oldest kid, Kojin, was like 7. And I was so like frustrated at him, mostly frustrated at myself, but projecting it onto him because that's what we parents do. Anyone single listening to that is like, wow, how could you do that? That's such a terrible thing to do. And parents are like, yeah, I get it. So I was going through this mini crisis because I was like, what am I doing wrong? I'm super intentional with parenting. I spend as much time and attention and love I can. And yet I'm hitting these brick walls with myself, really. And then I was just like, I remember having that thought, like, I'm doing everything. And then it was like Sammy, I think, told me, because I was telling him about this. And he was like, Benji, have you ever taken a course, like a parenting course? And I was like, no, I haven't. Right. And it wasn't about doing a course. That's not the point. The point is that was I willing to pay money to actually learn from somebody that's an expert in parenting, how to do parenting? And I was like, no, I was never willing to do that. And so it kind of like completely freed up my creativity and my like the ceiling of what was possible opened up because it was no longer I'm hitting the ceiling. It was like, oh, I haven't actually explored all the options out there. I haven't tried really, So it was actually more of a liberating. It was sobering in the middle, like when I was trying to figure it out. But when I actually like figure it out, like, okay, well, there's a version of me that a parent version of me that is not frustrated all the time and impatient and cursing and is able to just like laugh at the mistakes of my kids or my own mistakes, actually more so, and just laugh at myself when I do make a mistake or I say something that's unloving. And that was like the vision opened up. And then the pathway to get there was like, okay, let's get more coaching or let's talk to other parents who are going through this. Let's actually bought a really expensive course like the next day after that realization. And the same happens with sexual integrity. People, that are willing to go through our Ascend program for like porn. It's people that are willing to go through a 13-week program and meet in groups with brothers or sisters if you're a woman and do a daily mentorship and accountability with a mentor. It's an undertaking, but if you're not willing to do that, then you're probably not serious enough to actually change your behavior.
Yeah. So the idea of like being in this place where nothing quite makes sense is the unlearning of certain habits and then the relearning of new habits, because you can't just flush out all of your problems. So let's say with sexual integrity, you can't just adopt a bunch of new habits. That's more like the life coachy space, is just like you can just power your way through to a better day. And then the psychology world is much more like, how much trauma do you have? And both energies are good when they work synchronously, in harmoniously,
In sync.
in sync. Best band ever, by the way. And so this idea of unlearning and learning simultaneously is actually a requirement, and that's the messy middle. Because for a while you have to figure out what's true, what's not, and we have to do this constantly. Actually, like as a parent, like you said, when you get blessed, let's start with that. All of you single people are like, one day I'm going to get blessed, I'm going to fall in love, and it's going to be great. And yes, you can have that. The work aspect, though, of a blessing is unlearning a bunch of bad habits that you have, because you have a bunch. Even if they're not obvious to you now, they could even seem like assets. Like, man, I work out all the time. That's not so great when somebody else has a different schedule. Like if you're a morning person and your spouse is an evening person, and you normally do certain things at certain times, but they don't, and they want your time when you normally go to the gym. And like, how do you figure that out? Well, that's a part of this. And so you have to kind of unlearn ways of arguing or dealing with crisis, right? I've definitely had to learn how to listen more instead of reacting. I've definitely had to learn how to stop being a sarcastic jerk when I feel like a caged animal. When I feel like I'm being accused, then I will just turn into the most sarcastic, sour, acidic person. I've had to learn how to kind of deal with that and become better at communicating. So these things will all pop up, but in the moment, it doesn't feel like, oh, I've got to unlearn this habit. It just feels like, why does my life suck? It feels like, why is life so difficult right now? And that's two parts. That's one part, unlearning, like, wow, I'm bad at reacting to, let's say, stress in a relationship, for example. And then you have to unlearn some habits that you learned as a kid and growing up. And then the other half is I got to learn how to deal with it in a healthy way. So you have to kind of let go of certain things and then hold on to new things. But for a while, it's like, who am I? Who am I? That's this question of like, if I'm not, like some people, regardless of how bad their habits are, it's hard for them to let go because they don't know. Okay, for instance, I want to give you a very specific example. One of my best friends of all history was an older guy, and he was the reason why I moved to LA in the first place. He was this comedian, been on, he was very successful in his own right. And then he believed in me. And so that's all I needed. I just needed one person to believe in me. So I was like, all right. I packed my things, moved to LA. This dude was a comedian for a long time. He started in the 70s, and he was always a fat guy. That was his thing. He was 300 at his worst. He was like 330, something like that, 330 pounds, really big. And that was his identity. And then one day it got so bad that he actually ended up having a stroke, and he had to get his brother donated his kidney to him, something like that. And during our first conversation, he had this existential crisis. And I said, well, what do I do now? I've always been the fat comic. It's almost like he didn't want to not be fat anymore because that was like his identity, especially as his vocation. But it's also, those are the jokes that he made. That's how the world saw him. And even though it was not a positive thing, he didn't want to let go of it. And you know this, I think you've mentioned this on this podcast, Benji. So many guys, in particular, I haven't had this conversation with women, but for sure the guys, I've heard them say things like, deep down, I don't want to let go of porn because it's kind of part of who I am and how I've coped with life. It's like scary to think about a life without porn because that's an identity statement, right? Have you heard that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a helpful litmus test for everyone is if you could flip a switch and have a habit vanish from your life forever, but you would still have urges to go back to it, would you flip the switch? And that goes for food, right? Like food addiction, sugar, porn, abuse, alcohol, whatever it is. Anger, huge form of addiction that we don't recognize. And if the answer is, of course, I mean, most people would say, yeah, of course I would. But I honestly think if you had that choice, a lot of people would hesitate and be like, well, I kind of feel like this is, yeah, like you said, part of my identity, and it relaxes me. And those are all the justifications that come back that keep us stagnant and stifled, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So just think about that, right? Like for anybody who's out there, who's on the journey towards building sexual integrity, especially if you've been doing this for a while, but I've tried everything. It's a feeling. It's not a fact. You obviously haven't tried everything. That cannot be the fact because there's so many different ways towards health. So factually impossible. It's a feeling. It's the same as my wife had this saying, there's no time. I don't have time. And I was like, but the way she always says that, I make fun of her. She's like, I don't have time. And we got to the root of this. It's just a feeling. It's like, if you really assess, you do have the time. I don't have money. I don't have time. I've tried everything. These are all feelings. They're not facts about your reality. And so when you kind of look at that, I've tried everything feeling, and understand that it can't be factually true. And then you move into this understanding that in order to actually, again, this is for people who have tried and tried and tried. Maybe you've been doing this for years. You've been working, you've been in different ascend groups, whatever. If this is you and you feel like you've tried so hard, but you haven't made progress, I want you to consider the fact that you haven't been willing to go to this messy middle where for a period of time, nothing makes sense, and where you have to unlearn a bunch of habits, which is hard, and to learn a bunch of new habits, which is also hard. But it is a period of time when you're losing your old identity and when you're becoming a new person, and it physically can hurt. It can emotionally hurt for sure, and it can mentally be a form of anguish to some degree, but it's the only process of going through rebirth. Is you have to be born into a new identity, a new person. And that's going to come with some discomfort at the least, pain at most. And we've talked a little bit about this where like that was me, like growing up non-religious to becoming religious was physically painful, right? I felt nervous to the point of nauseous for months on end because I was like, what am I turning into? I promised I'd never be like this. And I was unlearning how to be a certain way, and I was learning how to be another way, right? And so it's like it doesn't come for free, but I think a lot of people are actually avoiding that major. It's like you got to go into this pit and you got to work things out. And there's a lot of analogies for this. You got to go through a dark tunnel in order to get to the light, something like that. But you got to spend time in somewhat of an ominous, amorphic space where like there's
uncertain.
Just total uncertainty, a fog.
I think your personal example of faith is really resonating with people because a lot of people are going through that right now as we speak. And so, well, people. I don't know.
I'm just joking. I know.
Person that is listening that is going through a faith, we call it a faith crisis. We call it. I think the messy middle is a healthy analogy, or the tunnel is a healthy analogy because it implies that there is an end. Yeah, and it is uncomfortable. Sure. And what I've noticed in talking to folks about their faith in particular is that people are very, very uncomfortable with being uncertain about their faith. Very uncomfortable. People want absolute certainty. People want a book, a rule book about how to believe. And when we find that rule book, it's more of just saying, okay, this is my rule book. There you go. And then that's it. But to get there and to make that decision, have that conviction takes that time period of just like, I have no idea what's going on. And you can be incredibly uncomfortable during that period. Or in my case, I like to just accept that I don't know. And that makes me feel, peace. It's like, I don't know yet. And that's okay. Maybe someday I'll figure it out and someday I'll know. But that period is a necessary part for sure. Absolutely. Because if we didn't have that messy middle, then we would have no conviction in anything.
It wouldn't be yours.
That period, you wouldn't be yours. You wouldn't have ownership. You wouldn't believe anything that you believe. It would just be like how, I don't know how to say this tactfully, but like how religion has been passed down. Okay, so let's break it down. I'm talking about religion as the doctrine, like the theology, the good stuff, the original intent of why it exists. I'm not talking about people, because when you add people and fallen nature to religion, that's when people have traumatic experiences and then they start blaming religion and all religion, like you were saying. But religion, like good religion, has been passed down for generations after generation, mostly as a black and white way, because this is the way that everybody in our community thinks. And there's no other option, right? I was just watching the show Vikings, which is so good on Netflix. And this is how the Norse believed in gods like Thor and Odin and all these, Valkyries and Valhalla. Like, this is how they believed. And then the whole show is about the conflict they had with Christianity when they went to England and settled in other places, right? But it's a beautiful thing to have tradition. But when we are not taking ownership of it, then it's fickle, it's weak, it's strained, it's not going to last, especially in a world that is more confusing than ever before. If you think about it like that, just because of the sheer amount of information and options in life and the internet, it's just way more uncertain. Because back in the day, it was just simple. Like, you just believe this because there's no other way to believe. There's no other way of thinking. And if you did think elsewhere or elsewise, you would be ridiculed, chastised, murdered, disenfranchised, all that stuff. But it's a beautiful thing. And I feel like at the end of God's story arc, it's the people of faith that decide with their own free will, like, this is what I believe and this is worth fighting for, even though I could just throw it all away and say none of it's real and live my comfortable life with absolute certainty. I'm willing to go down to that valley and face all those demons and that darkness and that uncertainty, because I know that there's something greater at the end of it.
Absolutely. It's the only way. In this era, it's the only way that you can stay afloat and stay sane, because a lot of people have to reject or accept something like an idea or a way of life out of pressure. And they can live in denial for a certain period of time, but things start to crumble. Now, this is part of what I was saying, is that we know sane people who were sane not so long ago, and something kind of snapped in them. And a lot of it is because they're defending something that's not real, because they've taken a side. And to be honest, it's sometimes exhausting to live in the middle, because it means that you don't have as many people to commiserate with when you're down, when your team's down, and to rejoice with and to fight with, right? And even in our movement, we're figuring out who we are, and that's perturbing for a lot of people. But in your journey towards becoming your high noon self, you have to go through this periodically. And I always recommend at least an annual retreat in your own mind, like retreat into yourself once a year. I do this. I go through a crisis where I allow myself to be completely wrong about everything, and then to figure out what is true. And it's exhausting. That's why I only do it about once a year, because that means that it's funny because you exhausting compared to what? To the gold miners of, 50 years ago here in Colorado. But I just mean emotionally exhausting to worry, to fret, to feel sad, to mourn. But let's say you lose a physical person in your life. To live in denial or to just say everything's fine, they're going to heaven, is not sincere. We have a deep need to mourn, to go through the processes of letting somebody go. And it's the same exact process for us if we want to let go of our old selves. We need to mourn that. Like I've had some deep mourning lately of the fact that I'm never going to have little kids again. Like I love having babies in my life. I just love raising babies. I love playing around. I love that 2 to 3 year old phase that a lot of parents get stressed out at because the kids are having temper tantrum. I loved all of that. And I love this phase too, but I realize that I'm never going to have that again. And that's deeply saddening to me. But I'm going through this process of mourning. And so that's healthy, because it hit me just recently, oh my God, there's no turning back the clock. And that's in part sad, but it's a part of what life is. And so I just have to accept it too. And then to appreciate what I have and what I've been through and where I'm going. And it's so healthy. And the same is true of your own sexual integrity. Please stick with me, people. If you don't mourn the mistakes and the missed opportunities in a healthy way of all the times that porn has gotten in the way of you being the person that you wanted to be, it could have really hurt your chances of getting blessed. Or if you are blessed, it could have hurt your blessing. To mourn that doesn't mean to dwell in the negative. It means to look at the negative, embrace it, hug it, and let it go and say, okay, now it's time to move on, right? It's a phase, but you cannot just skip to the next emotion of joy without some sadness and mourning and this. And when you do that in the messy middle, again, there's no like prescription for how long this is going to take or for even what the process is. But it's in order to actually move on beyond porn and to make it irrelevant in your life, you have to be self-sufficient. And in order to be self-sufficient, you have to take care of these debts from your past by sorting through the past, working through those emotions, and then starting to create wealth of emotions and experience so that you're not continuously just paying off debts. Okay. I once started a business with my wife, and I remember the exact experience of having a bunch in savings. Yeah. At the start of the journey and at the end of our business, it was the same exact number. It just had a minus next to it. And then we were in massive debt. And that lasted 6 or 7 years of utter torture, just like being in credit hell. And when you have bad credit, you can't get apartments. They just gouge you at every turn for like money, and they just kick you while you're down. It's really like you can't get ahead. It's so hard to get ahead. And I feel so bad for people who are stuck there. Some people live their whole lives there. It's hell. It's really terrible. But we do that emotionally. Trust me. Many of us live in emotional debts. So even when good things happen, they eventually peter out and we go back to being sad. And with sexual integrity, it's the same. It's like any progress you make, unless you've actually paid off those debts, you'll just wind up right back in porn. So to pay off those debts is imperative in order for you to be free to build emotional wealth throughout the long term. And that's the only way that you can have a sustainable sexual integrity journey in this life, is to work through the past, heal those wounds, heal that pain, deal with it, and move on with new habits and a new life and a new mind to be a resurrected person. You feel me? Feel me now?
Yep.
Yeah, but the process again is like, it's messy. There's a reason why we're calling it the messy middle, is because for a time you'll start asking questions like, will this ever end? Will this ever get better? Is it possible that sexual integrity is available to everybody else in this world except for me? Maybe I'm the one that, like, the one mistake that God made. And my life is meant to suck. Channel Gook applies to everybody else, but I'm like the clause. I'm like the trading leverage for Satan to be like, okay, you can have everybody, but not this guy. This guy's my guy. I don't want to let go of him. I got his trading cards. That's ridiculous. But you will say these things to yourself because you can't necessarily see beyond the pain when you're going through it. But that's why it's good to have other people who are on your team, and we're going to have an episode coming out about that are saying positive things and reminding you of who you really are and what your potential is. These are uncle figures, aunt figures, brother figures, sister figures who are reminding you of who you are so that you can recalibrate. You're like, oh yeah, I'm better than all these problems.
Yeah, I have to do that with my parents sometimes. I guess I'm in a fortunate situation where I go to them when I'm really struggling nowadays because I'm an adult. It's like once in a blue moon, I'll like my wife is not being very helpful for whatever reason, and I was like no one to go to, so I like go to my mom and dad, and I'll just like vent. That's the nice thing about a good parent, at least, is that you can just vent, kind of like God. Like God is always there to hear your venting. And so sometimes I just go to mom and dad's house and I'll just vent. Sometimes the kids are there, right, in the background. They're totally listening or pretending to not listen.
And you're venting about them?
No, I'm venting about myself most of the time. Like that voice you're talking about, Andrew, like we all have it. I verbalize it, like it's like really strong and I can hear it very clearly. So I have to acknowledge it. And like when I'm saying this, I hope people don't feel like I hate myself. It's just I'm very aware of when those voices come out. And so I like tell them to people. I want to tell them to my parents. I did this like a month ago or 2 months ago now, a month ago, and they were just listening. And then, so my whole spiel in my head is like, I'm a bad person. Yeah, I'm a bad father. I'm a bad husband, right? Like I'm a bad everything. And obviously it's not true at all in any measure. And then my dad is like, I'm really proud of you, right? Like this, like, you're doing a great job. And I'm like, why do you never say that? Like this I wasn't frustrated. I was just like so confused. Like, why is it he doesn't say that? And then he was like, well, it's because I feel like you don't need me to say that. Like I feel like you don't need old Papa to tell you that he's proud of you. And so I agree. It's nice to have people in your corner.
It's necessary.
Just to validate and, I don't know, kick your butt a little bit, but I feel like I kick my butt enough, so I don't need that from my parents.
For sure. You don't. Well, again, I guess, I don't know, I was going to use a Batman analogy from that first Batman. One of his tests was he had to get beat up by a bunch of guys who were dressed the same and he had to remember. But that's definitely what it feels like, is like you are being kicked around by yourself, by all these voices in your head. And it's from your past, it's from regrets, it's from anxieties about the future. So you're getting it from both sides and you're wondering how long this is going to last. And it can feel futile. And that's why God's voice. And it's hard to hear, the ethereal voice of God, because that happens usually in stillness. It doesn't necessarily happen when we're busy hating ourselves. So we need somebody else representing God's voice, representing unconditional love, to remind us that we're better than that present scenario. And that's why we need people on our team. Again, this episode is forthcoming, but the idea of who is on your sexual integrity team, you need people. You need people around the same age. I would say if you're a woman, elder sisters, and then so somebody your age, similar journey, common struggle. Elder sisters who are like at a different phase of life, they're beyond you and they're in a good place. And then aunts. And with brothers, it's guys your age, older brothers, and uncles or father figures. These are archetypal figures that we need to lock us in and let us hear what God really wants to tell us through unconditional love. Because sometimes we like seal off any possibility from God speaking to us. We're just too busy hating ourselves. But that messy middle, I'm telling you, it's for some people, it doesn't last that long. For some people, it lasts a little bit longer, but you will come out the other side so much stronger and so much clearer about who you are because you fought for that. And that's why I don't struggle with my faith ever. Like all this stuff that's been happening with our movement, I haven't flinched. Some of it is just like I get headaches because it's just hard to watch, right? But like the whole True Mother stuff is like I already worked through that in 2016. I was like, who is this woman? And I went on a crazy praying spree, had a lot of difficult conversations, and I saw her with my spiritual eyes. I was like, damn. Okay, and from then I haven't flinched.
You're talking about the only begotten daughter, not the detainment, just to be clear, right?
Everything, just like the whole, like who she is and her values. Like, I get it. Sure. I'm on your side. Like, but not because true parents, like each one of them, I had to fight. Like, who is this guy? Who is this? Because I joined the church when True Father was an old man. So when people are like, he's this great guy, I just saw this really old man on the stage yelling. I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I had to sort through that, right? But because I wanted to know, I didn't want all the naysayers. I didn't want to believe what they were saying. I didn't want to believe that. But also when people are like, this is who he is, I couldn't just believe that either, right? So I wanted to figure out who he was to me. And I did the same due diligence with True Mother, right? And so we have to do the same thing with ourselves. Who are you? Are you who your parents say you are? Are you who social media says you are? Are you who you say you are? Probably none of the above. You're probably some consortium of bits and pieces of all those plus more. But unless you can really look at your strengths and your weaknesses, and then again, mourn the past. Like I've made a ton of mistakes in my life. I hurt a lot of people, right? And I had to mourn that from my end. There's still apologies that I need to say to some people, right? But from my end, from my heart, I had to like really deeply work through these mistakes. And then that allowed me to then have the bandwidth to receive new feelings. That was true when I joined the church, and it was true also when I met High Noon and started doing this work. Yeah, because when I started working for High Noon, my wife and I were not in a good place. We were really not. And I was like, can I do this work? Is this legal? And what ended up happening is it put me on a fast track to be in a really good place with my wife, right? Because it was like, I want to do this work and I love my wife, but we're fighting. So I can use my work to become better at being a husband and start to remedy these situations. But if I didn't bridge that gap between my dysfunctions and what's going wrong and my desires, then I would have always just felt like a hypocrite and something would have broke eventually. But instead, I just faced in that messy middle. I want this, but I feel like I suck. Working through that for a few months, it put me on track to really being in a good place.
Yeah. I think there's a messy middle when it comes to health and fitness that I can see clearly.
Yeah, good luck saying that there's one way of being healthy and fit.
No, I mean in terms of people's individual goals, right? So if you're, let's say, for example, if you are like very overweight, high body fat percentage, but you want to be like, lean, there's a very, very messy middle in between where progress doesn't seem like, it just seems hopeless, like a death valley. And I'm just thinking of this example now just to be helpful in terms of how that can actually be an enjoyable process, is just being able to measure the right things and see daily progress in the tiniest things. Because if you're only looking at, I'm not where I want to be, right? If you're only looking at, I'm just in this messy period, and not recognizing the tiny, tiny, tiny victories that add up to the success, then it's just going to defeat you. You're just going to be defeated. Every day you're going to wake up, look in the mirror and be like, I haven't moved an inch. I haven't lost anything. And so I think that is probably one of the greatest life hacks I can give for sexual integrity too, is that find something different to track besides sobriety, right? And you make that your daily victory. It's like, am I tracking and progressing in this small metric, little by little, 1 degree at a time? And I think it makes the process of messiness more fun. And it's not that life has to be fun all the time, and then we're just a bunch of children, but it's possible to make it mostly fun. Yeah.
The poetic part about what you just brought up in terms of the fitness example is that, when you're stressed out about not making progress, that stress leads to cortisol, and cortisol actually makes fat stick around. There's a lot of people who have cortisol bellies because stress messes with your metabolism. It messes with your hormones severely, right? So similarly, when people are really stressed out about, let's say eating the right foods, then even when you do eat the right foods, you don't get all the benefits because you're stressed out, and stress messes with your metabolism. You don't process the foods well enough. And it's the exact same thing with sexual integrity. When you're stressed out about your streak, because I know a lot of people have these mental things where I always screw up at day 40 or whatever, then they're so stressed out that they're making it almost inevitable that they're going to screw up because they're not investing in the good emotions that you should be optimizing for. So if you're optimizing your life for not watching porn, it has nothing to do necessarily with optimizing your life for joy, for productivity, for meaning, for value. You could just be really good at, spiritually holding your breath, but eventually you're going to need to breathe in, and that's going to be a disaster. So instead of optimizing for not doing bad things, you should optimize your life for being a fulfilled person who does great things, and watch the difference between that. It's how you wake up is going to be very different. Okay, today I'm not going to watch porn. Okay, that's one way of waking up. Or today I'm going to just love the crap out of people. I'm going to walk around and just love people. I'm going to love myself. I'm going to do great things. I'm going to use my brain for thinking about things I really care about. I'm not going to be part of any conversations that are stupid or use my energy towards negativity. I'm going to use it towards uplifting people, edifying people, this kind of stuff. Very different. Same kind of realm, but very different emphasis, and they conjure very different feelings.
My favorite slide that you put together for any talk is the one with Smeagol. And it's just like, Smeagol, what does it say exactly? Smeagol is sexually pure, but not a good marriage candidate, right? And it's just a picture of Smeagol like suffering, because his whole battle in Lord of the Rings, just for everyone's information, is his battle is, should I kill Frodo for the ring or should I not? Right? Yeah. Which is exactly like, it's a terrible dilemma to be in. It's like, should I do something evil or should I not? There's no like winning goal. There's nothing he's shooting for. And in the end, he fails. Yeah. He just couldn't hold on to the idea of not killing someone for something. And then on the contrary, you have Aragorn, his whole story arc is like, I just gotta, anyways, his story is like, he is like, I will sacrifice everything for Frodo to destroy this ring with no certainty, absolute uncertainty, and 100% faith that maybe his efforts in leading this army to the Black Gates of Mordor, maybe he'll have a slight chance of saving Frodo and Sam, right? It's like, that's like the opposites, right?
Yeah,
Smeagol's.
Yeah, it's very easy to be flicked. When you're tightly wound, you're just ready to ignite, ready to combust. It's very easy to push somebody who's so tightly wound off track. And so The idea of if your options are like, I'm going to focus all my energy, like Gollum, on not killing somebody, then the best you can do is not doing something terrible, which is not a way to spend your life. Is like, I spent my whole life not doing something terrible. Look at me. Look at that. That's like, what a waste of a life. What about all the great things you could be doing? So very different energies. And again, so we, just to summarize, it's really important to be a part of this messy middle, to spend time losing your identity and rebuilding yourself in the image of who you want to be, in the image of who you believe God wants you to be, right? It can't just be a composite of who you want to be based on tropes that you learn from social media. Like, I want to be really cool. I want to have perfect hair. I want to say the right things, right? But rather, in the image of God is like the character-based things, the type of virtues that you want to espouse and adhere to. That's something that you can fight for. And be your own Aragon. For all you nerds out there like Benji, who can't help but shed a tear when he says the name Aragon. Be your own Aragon, who's like willing to go that extra mile and fight like crazy for your high noon self, right? I always see it clearly. Like, my wife is like, how are you so consistent with your schedule? Because every day, the night before, I'm writing out my day and I'm thinking about what's my best day tomorrow. And I do that because I want my tomorrow me to have a great day. And then when I wake up, I always look at my schedule of what I'm going to do that day. And I'm like, oh, thank you yesterday, me. That was super cool of you to look out for me. And so you have different versions of yourself throughout time and space. Call it the metaverse, just call it logic. And so to look out for your future self is to fight like crazy for that person to have an enjoyable experience, to make sure that they are being set up to win. So when we say optimizing your day to have a high noon day, do that. Fight like crazy to set yourself up to experience God's tremendous love and joy through the tangible and intangible parts of life. Anyway, I hope this makes sense. The messy middle concept didn't make sense to Benji in the beginning. Are you a convert? Do you understand now, Benji, what I mean by the messy middle? Great. Gotcha. Benji gets it. He's like, in terms of IQ, he's on like the low end. I'm on the high end. So that means that everybody in the middle should get it. Don't worry, Benji, you'll get that joke.
That's why we're together.
Just kidding. Benji's a genius. So are all of you. So thank you for listening. Please take care of yourself.
Hey there, it is Benji here. I want to ask for your attention for just a second. We are asking y'all who have been benefiting from the podcast for just one small favor. We don't ask for much. In fact, we actually try very hard not to ask much. But if you have benefited from this content in the podcast, then I want to encourage y'all to consider becoming a donor for High Noon. Yes, we are still a nonprofit and we rely on your donations to function. And if you would like to just donate $10 a month, if you are looking for a way to contribute your cash to something really meaningful, then I hope that High Noon can be that thing for you. So you can go to highnoon.org/donate. You can click in a link somewhere down below this episode and become a donor for just $10 a month or $20 or $100 or $1,000, whatever it is, guys. It is truly helpful. All right. So go check that out if you have benefited from this podcast in any way over the years. Lots of love.